Okay, so good evening. On behalf of the Care of Creation Office of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland, Eco Congregation Scotland, Justice and Peace Scotland, the Laudato Si movement, Pax Christi Scotland, the Scottish Catholic Education Service, SCIAF, and the Scottish Laity Network, I'd like to welcome you all to the fourth and final session of our Season of Creation 2025 series. As we mentioned in the email, we have a change to our companions for this evening. Unfortunately, Margaret McPhail is unable to be with us tonight. She is recovering from surgery, and we pray that she will soon be back to full health. I'll now hand over to David Coleman, the chaplain of Eco Congregation Scotland, who will lead us in our gathering prayer.
Actually, at the moment, this month, apart from it being Season of Creation, I've been thinking about time passing. So I've been in ministry now 30 years, and I spent this afternoon with Anglican trainee Episcopal priests thinking about various things and how it is that it's the treasures that we have, the parts of our faith that we're familiar with, where the resources lie sometimes. And so I'm going to show you a wee film in a minute, but I'll start with a prayer and I'll give you the context of it by just sharing the screen. There we go. When I was at college, we used to gather on a Wednesday morning, and because we had a Lutheran tutor, we used to do the sort of Lutheran Matins prayers. And that began with a quote from the letter to the Hebrews, which said, God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in time past to our ancestors by the prophets, has in these days spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he also made the worlds. And what that says to me now is that the more we're aware of crisis and threat, the more Christ himself is actually relevant to us. That we're not looking at this sort of cuddly creation myth that people say, oh, well, that's how things came about. But right now, that what some traditions would call that personal relationship is what we need. So this is, for tonight, a prayer for when the days seem to be the last days. Let's pray. Sustaining friend, your teaching in these, for us, last days, builds joy and faith, shines lights from hills and mixes yeast with dough to rise with loving hope defiant for every day we are given. And if we follow you, then delighting in each of these days, we'll watch the birds, converse with seas. We will learn from all those trees who breathe out praising our God green of justice, of the earth, of the poor and of every creature downtrodden or denied a home. Dear Christ, ascended to be present for that world for whom you are sent, weave, embrace and bless with amplifying grace our repentance, our commitment, our discernment, yes, our living sacrifice, powered by your wild wind spirit, to brightly reaffirm our human place and purpose, to be caring for your world. Amen. And a wee film which was part of my 30th anniversary service last Sunday.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I catch the sweet dhofar of him that hails a new creation. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven I keep from singing? Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It finds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? What though the joys and comforts die, the Lord my Saviour liveth. What though the darkness round me close, songs in the night He giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? The peace of Christ makes fresh my heart, a fountain ever springing. All things are mine since I am His. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing?
Okay, good evening. Rob. Over to you.
Just like to hand over now to invite Stephen possibly to share something about his role within Eco Congregation Scotland and a wee bit about Eco Congregation Scotland itself.
Thank you very much, Rob, and I'm delighted to be joining so many people who we already know from across our wider movement across the country, not just from a Catholic tradition, but from a wide range of churches in different areas and parts of the country. So it's a real pleasure to be with you in this special Season of Creation event this year as Pilgrims of Hope, as we celebrate the Jubilee with people of faith all around the world. Eco Congregation Scotland, I've been involved in that for the past 7 years with David as our environmental chaplain. I'm also a parishioner at St Helens Church in Langside in South Glasgow, parts of the Archdiocese of Glasgow. And Eco Congregation is an ecumenical charity which supports local churches across Scotland to address environmental issues with the aim to care and act for God's creation. There are over 620 registered eco congregations. That's about between a fifth and a sixth of all Scottish churches across denominations. There's 45 Catholic parishes already involved across Scotland as eco congregations in all 8 Catholic dioceses. And that forms the largest community-based network of local environmental groups led by volunteers in parishes across Scotland. Each is committed to environmental action in the life and mission of their church, with the church building, grounds, and of course, volunteers, key local resources for action to tackle the climate emergency and protect nature, inspired by our faith. We have Eco Congregation Awards, which we'll hear a bit more about in a minute, and they recognise growing levels of action by local churches. And St Ninians in Mingus Dundee is the first Catholic parish in Scotland to achieve gold. So congratulations to those of you who have joined us tonight from St Ninians, and I'm sure there'll be others to follow. So Eco Congregations and our volunteers also gather locally with other churches in their area and organise in local networks, which we hope will be able to cover all of Scotland on a regional basis to meet, share and encourage good practice. We're also looking for volunteers to lead in local churches to host future meetings. Our movement is in churches all across Scotland, and we support and encourage churches through three aspects of work. Spiritual living, that's to discover what it means to care for God's creation in prayer, worship and conversation, with David as our ecumenical eco-chaplain, a gift from the United Reformed Church for all churches in Scotland, helping the whole congregation to make the link between their faith in Christ and environmental concerns. Practical living is a second aspect where we put that care into action individually, locally, nationally and globally, desiring to live justly in a transformed world. And that's really about taking practical action in individual lives, in our community, in our church, in the church building, if you've got church grounds, in the church grounds. And that's where that commitment to net zero, to decarbonise, to reduce the harm we cause to the planet is so important, and that witness that we can bear in our own lives to making a real impact on reducing the harm we cause to the planet. And the third and final aspect is around global living. That's to commit to campaign on the urgent threats to the web of life in our vulnerable world. And only in the last few weeks, we've seen the biggest lobby ever on environmental issues, where SCIAF, Justice and Peace Scotland, other faith organisations, including ourselves as part of Stop Climate Scotland, have lobbied our MSPs on action to tackle the climate emergency through the Scottish Parliament. And that's really about having a positive impact on or working with national and global environmental justice concerns, and issues like fair trade are really important as part of that as well. So those three aspects about worship, action and advocacy are where we encourage local leadership in our churches to take that action. And I'm really pleased to introduce to you tonight one of the real star examples of our movement in Scotland, St Ninian and St Cuthbert's Parish in Hamilton, a silver award winner. I'm sure they'll be going for gold very soon, but some inspiring work that's been done there. Really pleased to welcome Eileen McQuade, who's a real star of our movement. Thank you very much, Eileen.
Okay. So in August 2022, a Care of Creation group was formed in my parish. In June 2023, we received a silver award from Eco Congregation. I'd really recommend any new Care of Creation group to aim at getting an Eco Congregation award. Getting awards in itself isn't important, but the focus, the motivation and the direction it gave us was. And moving forward, it was invaluable to us as a group to be aiming for an Eco Congregation award, and the sense of purpose it gave us certainly helped shape us as a group. As a Care of Creation group, we took our inspiration from Pope Francis's letter, Laudato Si, care of our common home. Many people look on this encyclical as an environmental encyclical. It's much more than that, and that's where I find hope. Pope Francis says that the crisis facing humanity is not climate change. Climate change is, simply put, just a symptom, along with pollution, throwaway culture, loss of biodiversity, human trafficking, etc., of the real crisis that humanity is facing. It's a spiritual crisis caused by brokenness in our fundamental relationships. These are our relationships with God, with one another, and with creation. Scientists have an essential role to play in finding solutions to our global problems. But if we leave it to science alone, lasting solutions cannot be found, because they cannot mend our broken fundamental relationships. and we'll stay where modernity has placed us, trying to control creation and one another by placing ourselves where only God should be. So our Care of Creation group, while raising awareness of the problems facing the world and encouraging people to change their behaviours, focuses on how our actions can mend relationships. In doing this, we can confirm what Pope Francis says about everything being connected. We might plan something to improve one relationship, but discover that other relationships are also improved. I want to give you a couple of examples. When we started our Care of Creation group, the first event we organised was a Daisy service. Building a stronger relationship with our local Church of Scotland was very much in our hearts. At the hospitality afterwards, I asked parishioners and the minister if they had a Care for Creation group. They said no, but it was something they should think about. I said, if you do, I think it would be good if we could work together in the community. When they decided to look into forming one, they were invited to our meetings to see how we were working. They stayed. We became an ecumenical Care for Creation. From the beginning, we were agreed that it was important to go beyond the church walls and into the community. As we've so often found, the wind was behind our backs. A local charity asked us to take responsibility for the allotments in their community garden. Whenever we work in the community, we go with the understanding that where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst. So we understand that together we take church into the community. St. Francis says the last arrow to be fired is the word. So we don't speak about our faith, we simply live it. St. John Henry Newman says to leave the fragrance of Jesus behind us, and that's our intention. People, however, have spoken to us spontaneously about matters of faith. A mutual relationship has grown between the local charity and us. It's not a them and us situation. They are not simply the recipients of our voluntary work. We work in partnership with one another for the good of a very impoverished community. They look out for our needs, telling us about courses, pointing us in the direction of grants for our church, etc. Over the past 3 years, we've supported and responded to a number of local charities and community groups. Our ecumenical connections include the Coptic Church, the Episcopalian Church, and another Church of Scotland. We've also developed a network of contacts with other Catholic churches in Motherwell and beyond, and our profile as a church has grown in the community. From the beginning, we also wanted to reach out and build relationships with the youth. Our feeling was to meet them where they were. So we decided we would have a Laudato Si book club for our Caritas parishioners for 1 hour a week over 8 weeks. This was more or less the same as a Laudato Si book club that I had done previously with adults. It wasn't watered down, and I think that was a large part of the appeal to the youth. At the end, we asked them to hit us between the eyes with their comments and tell us how we could make this a better experience for future Caritas students. We weren't prepared for their replies. The things they said were, "It has made me want to do more things to help, such as reducing the amount of plastic I buy and changing my diet to have a vegetarian lifestyle instead." Laudato Si allowed me to reflect on what it means to be part of the Catholic Church. It has changed my way of thinking, and we should take extra care of our environment as God would want us to. It has taught me to be grateful for what I have and give to those who are less fortunate than ourselves. Each week we had a different chapter, and in one session we spoke about the small changes we could make to try and improve our environment by turning off lights when we were finished with them and reducing the amount of plastic we threw away. It taught us that although our voices are small alone, when we work together we can make change happen. We also enjoyed helping out at coffee morning and helping with children's liturgy. Overall, our experiences of Caritas within the parish have really allowed us to grow closer to our faith and ultimately change our way of thinking towards the world. It allowed us to work together with our fellow Caritas students and other members of the church community. There have been many highlights for our Care of Creation group, but as I prepared to speak tonight as a community of hope, an eco-congregation community of hope, I kept coming back to one thing to speak about, the hope of evangelisation. At the start, I mentioned that people often refer to Laudato Si as the environmental's encyclical. I can only assume that they haven't read it, as it's much more than that. It certainly mentions climate change, pollution, etc., but it would be more accurate to describe it as a spiritual roadmap. It's a call to conversion and a new way of proclaiming the gospel in our time. It is, in fact, a path to evangelisation. I've chosen to give an experience of ecumenism and what I see as evangelisation of the youth tonight. They're deeply connected with one another. Pope Francis said there can be no evangelisation without ecumenism. Our Care for Creation group has gone beyond dialogue, and by being the 2 or 3 gathered in his name in the community, we present Christian unity to heal the fractured face of Christ that's been caused by sectarianism in our Scottish communities. There was a report done about 3 years ago, and it said that in 25 years, the Church of Scotland would no longer exist in Scotland. In 40 years, the Catholic Church and the Episcopalian Church would also be gone. When I heard this, my immediate response was, unless we do things differently. Lorna Gold called Laudato Si a new form of evangelisation, and I think we have to see and appreciate that it's so much more than the green or environmental encyclical that it's often referred to as. It's more, that's really what I wanted to say. I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Thanks so much, Eileen. David, would you like to share a bit about your role?
About the role, well, I think I'd say immediate agreement with what we've just heard. I was, again, as I say, speaking to trainee Episcopal priests this afternoon, as that part of my job is, wherever possible, to talk to those who are in training for the leadership of the churches, because they need to be aware and prepared, and if any of them have any lingering doubts as to what the causes of the situation are, we need to move them on from that as well. But I said, can anybody remember the Scottish Ecumenical Assembly, which was right at the beginning of the millennium? And so, okay, some of them were probably barely born at the time, but we had this great big coming together, and there was a lot of hope and a lot of development of friendships and relationships. And then, if you like, we got to the drafting stage and it all got rather watered down. And so it faded away and got shoved back into the filing cabinets. But I think George MacLeod, the founder of the INO community, talked about a demanding common task is what builds community. And we have a demanding common threat, actually, with the state of the planet and the reasons that were just outlined, why that is happening. And that surely should be a strong motivator for us to break down any silly sectarianisms that still remain, and look at a coming together which respects our differences and actually cherishes our diversity. We've got this idea of biodiversity in the sciences. The more variety is, the more healthy things are. Okay, that was just a wee comment on Eileen, thank you. The chaplaincy, again, was given, I think, with a fairly low-key remit, and it's sort of gradually grown and developed, to be there and to encourage, and to visit churches, to lead worship, to, I think, draw people's attention to how our faith is so much more than we probably have ever grown up thinking, a faith of our relationship, our worship of God alongside other creatures. And if I just actually pace through that opening phrase from Laudato Si, It's learning to be creatures amongst creatures, in a way which certainly has plenty of depth and authenticity, but also finding what our special place and purpose as human beings is, and indeed, therefore, what it means to be the church, with a consciousness of where we are at this point in time. This is a role that has no power, so everything is about developing relationships, convincing people, building trust mutually, trying to develop the friendships which will enable us to speak clearly to each other. And again, if you've seen some interfaith and ecumenical gatherings, sometimes it's just a little bit too polite to get anywhere sometimes. Also, it is, I'd say, the role of the chaplain is to make sure that we don't fall back into the I'm greener than thou sort of stuff, that we remember that everything we do is dependent on God's grace. And that means, like that the activities, the actions that people do, a local church has not saved the world by fitting a heat pump or changing all their light bulbs, but that is, in the same way as prayer, something good, the right thing to do, which is offered to God. And the grace of God makes up for any absence of scale or power or whatever that we have. The chaplains, as I say, it's grown, it's been noticed. Because of the telecommunications we now have, and perhaps through lockdown, we're much more in touch with people around the world, perhaps, than we used to be. That global living sort of idea. I mean, you know, we've been able to be in touch with people in the Pacific and mainland Europe. Part of the role now is that I'm party to all the arguing that goes on about the theme of the season of creation, and there is quite a bit of arguing before they come out with a theme like they did this year, peace with creation. So I suppose people have described it as being like Jeremiah, the sort of prophet of judgment and doom, but also like Barnabas, the encourager. Saying to people, you're doing something wonderful, shout about it, and being able to point to that is mainstream gospel. People growing up in the UK tend to think, oh, well, you know, we might be doing good things, but it's pious to keep them quiet. Well, that bit of the gospel is about how you safeguard the dignity of people that you help. But if you are doing good things, and many of you people in the congregations are, then let them see what you're doing, that they may praise your Father in heaven. I'm interested to hear, again, in Eileen's comment, that idea of evangelization. And I think, again, we're in a culture where commending your faith has got a bad press, really. But then again, letting people see what you're doing, letting people see why you are doing what you're doing, that itself is pretty powerful, I think. Being visible, letting people see that it is, you know, something you do out of love. As a movement too, it's great to see that the people in Eco Congregation Scotland, we're involved in lobbies, but we're involved in lobbies lovingly. There are some groups perhaps are a little bit more assertive and upfront, or even abrasive in the criticisms that they might make of people in authority. We tend to say, well, we're trying to find ways to support you because you're doing the right thing, rather. And that also, I suppose, is because we have the resources of faith and tradition and prayer and spirituality. It helps that there are some people in a community who haven't entirely lost hope, even if they are party to and aware of facts and figures which might lead you in that direction. Is there anything else I do, Stephen? Write articles, make films? Yes. Well, what else? What am I missing?
Pretty comprehensive.
As I say, lockdown was a peculiar time and a sort of a formative time for the role because, nobody could get around and visit each other. And actually, at that point, we noticed some of our network meetings worked really well because online meetings like this have reshuffled the accessibility. In the church that I'm a member of in Edinburgh, the people who were housebound suddenly started taking as full a part in worship as everybody else. And at that time, we really started developing the media side of it, the filmed reflections, and also stealing an idea from the Forest Church movement, the little 2-minute stilling videos, which give you a sort of a 2 minutes in a natural situation, which is a good sort of lead into prayer or preaching or whatever. So it probably sometimes looks like a team, but there's not many of us there. But what we're trying to do also is bring people in. So Marion, of course, who's with us, has contributed a poem to this year's resources, which starts off very, very gently and then sort of hits you with the implications of where we are. So we service the needs of churches, particularly with the season of creation, but we also try and encourage the creativity and even the boldness, the daring of people to express their faith and their concern and their love. Does that say enough for now?
That's excellent, David. What I think we could move to now is to bring in Marion. Again, we invite people to put any questions, comments in the chat, and just have a sort of panel where we can dialogue, because the whole idea is just for people to get a bit more knowledge, to have if they've got any questions, just to have the opportunity to raise them. So I will work my magic and get all these people together.
Right. Ta-da.
So over to you, Marion, if you're okay.
Thank you very much, Rab. And thank you to David and to Stephen and to Eileen for what we've heard so far. But I'm sure there's lots more that we could hear. If some of you out there could put some questions into the chat. Meanwhile, I'm going to cheat, as I always do, and ask the first question, which is, right, the theme of this year season of creation is, as David said, peace with creation. And I wonder what that actually means to each of you. David, you're nodding, so perhaps I should go to you first. Sorry.
I've said in the last 2 years that the sort of revolutionary word in the themes that we've had is with. And again, a lot of lobbying and campaigning of things sort of somehow treats the earth and our fellow creatures and the environment still like a thing, still like the way slaves have been treated in the past, without personality, without rights, without opinions, which is very, very different from the way it's presented actually in the Bible. I know when I've looked at various translations of the Canticle of St. Francis that's quoted in Laudato Si, there's the word with comes up in some very crucial places, that we are praising God alongside other creatures. We are there, we are God's gift to them, rather than, as I've often heard in sermons say, God's given us the earth. No, that doesn't quite work. So the withness, the togetherness makes sense. I'll also say, I suppose I could refer back to one of the, to me, very useful things that Pope Francis said, that we are, as a species, we are at war with creation. We're at war with the entities on whom we actually depend. And putting that perhaps in context with conversations which I had at COP26, the scientists there, they actually use language like the Earth will be our friend until we get to 1.5 degrees, and then they might not be able to. So the relatedness, the relationshipness, that's what humans have, this gift of relating to persons, personalities. And if we rule that out in our relationship with creation, it's hardly surprising if we blunder in and make a horrible mess.
Eileen, what about you? What does peace with creation mean to you?
I think it is that respect, the awareness that we're all part of creation. There's no domination, there's no abuse, exploitation, but we recognise that we are one with creation, we're part of creation, and we live in accordance to that, in recognition of that.
And what about you, Stephen? Have you got a take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important we think about hearing the cry of the earth and the poor from Laudato Si. And obviously, those of you who are Laudato Si animators know that what I mentioned is our three planks of work: spiritual, practical, global living. It's exactly the same as the integral ecology pillars that Laudato Si animators are looking at through their programme around the world, around ecological conversion, sustainability, but prophetic advocacy. We need to denounce unjust policies. We need to denounce unjust practices that don't hear the cry of the earth and the poor. So for me, I think peace with creation is acknowledging we are all part of creation as much as everything else on this common home that we share. And peace with creation is quite pointed because we know that there is conflict which fuels the injustices, but also damages the planet even more. And we can see them around the world. We can feel them sometimes in our own communities and the attitudes we have to the planet and to each other. And for me, that hearing the cry of the earth and the poor will bring peace to creation if we really listen.
I think that puts us on a different footing, and that's great. Thank you all very much for that. I wonder, Rab is saying how much awareness is there about the Bishops' Conference inviting parishes to become eco-congregations. Now, I know that in conversations I've had where there were people of different denominations, that quite often Laudato Si was a document that everybody else knew about, and the Catholics went, what? So I don't know, are you finding that there is an awareness, Stephen, perhaps?
Yeah, there's certainly been, I mean, there was a very prominent call in the Pentecost letter in 2021, the run up to the COP26 conference, which of course was hosted in my home city of Glasgow in Scotland. The UK government was the president, the host for that. And there were two aspects to that. One was around the parish community becoming eco-congregations. And the other aspect, of course, is looking at Laudato Si schools, which is a big focus, particularly for the Catholic community and the schools that we have, the denominational schools in Scotland. And it feeds into the Caritas work, which Eileen was talking about for older students in the secondary schools as well. So there's been a clear call from that point. Catholic Church was involved 24 years ago when we first started as a movement in Dunblane as an ecumenical movement with all sorts of representatives from churches across Scotland. Catholic Church was involved there and then. So it's possibly been a slower burner in the Catholic community than in the Church of Scotland and the Scottish Episcopal Church, who have got a larger proportion of their local churches involved in our movement. But from the bishops, there's a consistent level coming from Laudato Si in particular, reaching back into the tradition of the church over 2 millennia, but also since COP26, we feel we've got to step up. So we're there on a regular basis as part of the conversation. How do you get your community of faith, your church, to be active in this? And certainly our volunteers across the country are encouraging others to be involved. And it's the easiest place to work with other churches. It's so easy to be ecumenical on environmental issues and care and action for creation. So I would say all 8 bishops are very supportive in relation to this work. Archbishop Nolan's had a particularly keen interest, partly because of his role in relation to justice and peace when he was in Galloway. Then when he moved to Glasgow, COP26 being there was a big deal for him. So the leadership's been quite strong from that perspective. And I think that goes across all 8 dioceses. It's part of the work. The net zero commitment the church has made, which is very practical, often around property, reducing the energy costs, both environmentally and financially, is one aspect of that. It's something where the 8 dioceses, with the parishes all underneath the diocese as a single charity, makes it really important that 8 of them organise collectively within their own parish communities in each diocese, but also together through the Bishops' Conference and the Office for the Care of Creation. So we're delighted to be part of that as an ecumenical partner. But SCIAF, Justice and Peace, Scottish Catholic Education Service, and key volunteers like Rab and Eileen involved in that conversation in that group of the Office for the Care of Creation means the parish focus is always paramount, because that's where we'll make the biggest difference.
Thanks. Eileen, you spoke about working ecumenically in your area. Would you say that the bishop's support has been evident, or do you feel you were just kind of left to get on with it?
I think we just went ahead, to be honest with you. But what it did was it opened doors, like with the Coptic Church. The Coptic Church had been in our area for, well, it's now 12 years, but there'd been no contact with them. I thought they had only moved in to the area. You know, I was aware that it was an old, I think it had been a Church of Scotland that had been taken over, and as I drove past one day, I realised it was Coptic Church and thought we should introduce ourselves. I thought they'd just moved in. So, you know, I drove by one day and saw people going in, and I just went over and chapped the door, basically. And it opened up very much. So the priest there had contacted me when Pope Francis had died and asked, could I keep him informed of how he could pay his respects? So I did that, and he came to a service. The bishop spotted him in the crowd, brought him down to the front, had his photo taken with him, and invited him recently to one of our high schools for an event. So the door was wide open. And I think so often, I felt that even the first Tazy service, when we had asked the Church of Scotland, we didn't know if we were going to get a response at all. We had one ecumenical event on the calendar, and we had no idea whether anybody would come. And we just wanted it to be a success, so we could have 2 ecumenical. But it was like a family gathering. There was no pushing on the door. Everybody was so delighted to be together. The Catholic Church and the Church of Scotland. It was the most natural coming together, and a real warmth from the very, very start. So while you thought you were, you know, I think often people are just waiting for a door to open, and all you have to do is go through that door, and the warmth and the readiness is already there to greet you. And that's certainly been, and the same experience with Episcopalians. I had gone down and chapped the door and asked if he'd be interested in the Tazy service. And so another link has been formed in the chain. But it just takes someone to take a step, I think. And certainly, you know, we've seen that the bishops have responded very, very warmly and encouraged what we're doing. But I think as laity, we have to be more proactive at times, rather than feeling this is someone else's job. You know, we're baptized as prophet, priests, and king, and we have to act that out in our lives.
You're agreeing, you're nodding at least, David.
Yes. I mean, my tradition, Reformed tradition, indeed also the congregational bit of it, I think sees sees Christians as called to be, I think one of the words we used to use was pardoned rebels. That laity, the people on the ground, are exercising the priesthood of all believers by their actions and their convictions. But what I think needs to happen is that people on the ground need to know what's going on at a higher level as well. Through by hook or by crook, and also because I was invited, I went to a conference in Assisi over the last two years. And I'm just going to quickly show you a picture. This was, whoops, there we go. This was the sort of the table in the final service of that conference, and you can see if you read round those labels, that includes, of course, the Coptic Church. There were 15 of 16 world families. Whoops, did that happen? No,
Yeah.
yes, it did. Well, never mind. Let's stop sharing. What I was trying to say is that the conversations are happening, sometimes at a high level, but there's a gap in the middle. When I spoke to the Pontifical College in Rome, because you can do that if you travel by train, you can just drop by. They said, yeah, well, Laudato Si is wonderful, and we're absolutely delighted that people in other churches are taking an interest in it, but it doesn't seem to have made a great deal of difference to day-to-day worship in our parishes. How do we have that mutual encouragement of the different layers of the various churches, so that you don't get people saying, well, we're just going to, we've done that green stuff, now we'll get down to the proper business of being church, and we might come back to it later.
Uh-huh. In a way, Sheila's comment and questioning kind of takes us into that, what do we do and how do we do it? She's saying that Eileen had suggested vegetarianism. She is suggesting that being vegan is even better, because it's better for our fellow creatures. And she talks about industrial farming and so on, and deforestation. That's the lobbying thing, isn't it? How do we get into that? How do we encourage people to talk about that, to write the letters and so on? Stephen?
Yeah, I will say a little bit about that, Marion. I mean, I think it's really important that those issues are really significant. And sometimes it could be quite challenging because people look at them as being part of their local economy and their community. But we know there's an impact on the environment from the way we all live. We can all do something. That sort of advocacy ask, the lobbying ask, we're really lucky because Stop Climate Chaos Scotland, I mentioned earlier, as a coalition, brings together dozens of organisations, some of whom have got a real interest in things like food, making Scotland a good food nation, which is also about the environmental impact of production of food and consumption of food, as much as it is about the right of people in poverty to be able to feed themselves and their family. So there's a really important connection we can have there and opportunities. I also find that the government is open to engage with organisations and individuals who've got opinions. It's the only way you can influence policy. So we've been involved in discussions on the idea of a just transition, which is about making it fairer. So those communities that bear the brunt, we know this motivates us in climate justice issues. The Global South bears a huge cost of climate change because of decisions and lives that we lead. But in our own country, there could be changes that affect land use and agriculture, that affect the way people travel, which is the biggest component that contributes to our carbon footprint in Scotland, transport. The way buildings are built and used, and we know that from our own churches and our own communities. So the door's open to engage on how we can make changes that are fairer, and there's opportunities that arise to be part of that, to express an opinion. It can be a very local opinion. It could be about the buses not being accessible or affordable where you live in Loch Gilphead to get to different parts of Argyll, for example, Marion. It could be about people being concerned about the environmental impact of the way the farming community is now centralised a lot, and the way that products have to travel huge distances to be marketed and mass produced. And that can affect communities as much as looking at the way that reduction of our carbon footprint might mean that we eat in a much healthier way for everybody, and it's possibly more of a plant-based way as well, a low carbon way. So there are ways you can talk about this in your own community. And what we found through eco congregations is the church is a safe place, a sanctuary by tradition, but it becomes a safe place for people to talk and share their concerns about this and how it interacts with other concerns they've got. Everything's intersectional now. So justice and peace concepts are really crucial for that, in terms of the integrity of creation, care for creation being part of the discussion there. So please be bold. And we always think we're small. 4/5 of the world has got a faith. And in Scotland, the faith community brings numbers to these issues. When we look round at that biggest lobby ever in environmental issues at the Scottish Parliament less than a fortnight ago, that was a community of faith that was bringing a large group of people from across the country with other people, people of goodwill, as you would see in a papal encyclical. So the important thing is never lose faith in the power that we have from our own voice, but our collective unity, whether it's within our own church, within our own churches in the Catholic Church, with other churches, people of faith, or the whole of the country. Expressing a view about action will be listened to and has to be responded to, and will influence what's coming up, for example, in the Scottish Parliament election next May.
Eileen, have you found that people are willing to do the letter writing, to do the lobbying and so on?
One of the things we found really helped, you know, just in our parish and the demographics of it, people are a wee bit shy of using the internet at times. So, you know, there's maybe some things that come through asking you to write to your MP, and they find that a big step. But we had put on to the parish WhatsApp a kind of step-by-step they work for us, and how to contact your MP, and to put up, I think we put up a draft letter as well, but suggested, you know, altering that a bit to make it more just a wee bit different, that they weren't getting dozens of the same letter. That made a significant difference. People coming back and saying thanks very much, you know, that was so easy to do, and they'd obviously not done it before. So, I mean, as we go forward, we'll keep doing that. Just put those instructions up so that they can follow that and find their MP and write to them online. So that makes a difference. They'll certainly sign petitions. You know, letter writing's a wee bit harder, but they'll sign petitions. They're happy enough to do that. But I do feel that's been a wee bit of a breakthrough, to break it down step by step for them to follow.
Yeah, I think that I mean, we do a lot of letter writing, and we find, and it might have been you, Stephen, that advised us that send it not just by email, but send it by post as well, so that it's there. We are finding that the Westminster government now, it takes about 2 months for a reply to come back, and it comes back from a team, the communications team, but we have much better response from the Scottish Parliament. So our MSPs are more amenable to being asked to do things or to respond to things. David, have you any advice for us on that front?
Well, I mean, you know, looking at things like dietary disciplines, it's another thing the churches have got centuries of experience in. A few years ago, I was persuaded to be seen to give up meat for Lent, and somebody managed to stir up the farming community about this. So, you know, sometimes even the most harmless and traditional actions can provoke a little bit of debate. Very interesting. I mean, I think if any of us do carry on eating meat, we need to know the things that what's the lady's name? that Shira's put into the chat. We need to know what we're doing if we're choosing to have that impact, rather than pretend it's nothing to do with us.
As somebody who doesn't do meat, yeah, I'm not sure of the impact on our local farmers, but
well, obviously, there are many different versions of farming. Thinking of, when I visited the Orkney Islands, there are one or two islands which are definitely completely beef economy. But then, there is such a thing as a just transition. There's also the animal welfare aspect of it. And very likely, though, the cattle on the Orkneys were being rather better treated than the ones in factory farms in other places. So there's all sorts of nuances, but broadly speaking, yes, I think even the things we eat and how we eat them are things we need to be aware of and maybe be prepared to change. Yes.
Are we too reliant on fruit and vegetables that come from many, many thousands of miles away? Is that a problem that we should be more aware of?
Yeah, that's a massive issue. It's a massive issue that if we could get information, I mean, you get the dietary information is required in a lot of labelling now, telling you there's too much salt, there's too much sugar. Well, that's maybe just my diet, but there's too many of these bad things. You're eating too much of that in this particular product. So it would be helpful if you knew the air miles that something's travelled. Now, I did mention fair trade earlier. We do want to support fair trade. We do want to support sustainable economic change and progress, particularly in the global south, bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. And they'll often be responding in ways that do tackle the environmental issues. So I'm not personally advocating us making sure we don't import any food products and we just live off our own produce in our own country. The flip side of that is that there can be really healthy ways for us to encourage communities to share and grow food already. And you can see things like community food initiatives, allotments, and also a lot of people in this meeting tonight involved in supporting or even running food banks through their own church and their own communities. Sometimes access to local food can help be part of the answer in addressing some of those issues around poverty. Again, it's coming back to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor again, and it's all connected. But we have to be aware that there is a huge environmental impact. You see that some parts of our country where you have shellfish that's imported to the Far East to be packaged and brought back here again to be sold in our own shops. I mean, there's something ridiculous and absurd about a global economy that thinks that that's a good thing to do. So some of the supermarkets want to challenge this. Some of the retailers, obviously the cooperative movement is more positive about some of this change, but there are big supermarkets where they'll encourage people to take action on the packaging as part of an action in the building of the shop itself, because they know there's a cost to the packaging. It's not just to keep the products fresh. It's sometimes because that's the way the customers want it to be presented. So it's a customer-led decision sometimes. So we can certainly push on all of this, and local produce being something that we should be nurturing, encouraging, and sharing and consuming far more is a really important part of that.
So basically, David, following on from that, do you think, as Rab is questioning, that people have actually got a sense of the responding to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, that is not optional? We just got to do that. We've got to respond to both of those.
Right. I'd say this particular year, that is becoming increasingly political as well as spiritual, because people are being sold the idea that it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to pretend that your actions don't hurt your neighbour, be they human or otherwise, in creation. And so churches need to be places where it's not only encouraged, but need to be safe places where you can hold those opinions. Sometimes it's going to reach that level that, you know, you may be looked down on for saying we need to hear the cry of the poor in the earth. How do you know? So I think the thing about movements like ours is we're here to give people that mutuality, that community support, that it's worthwhile sticking your neck out and doing the right thing and actually discovering what's enjoyable in it as well. And I think of the vegetarians I know, a lot of them really enjoy their food. Um, but you know, churches over centuries have encouraged people to engage in devotional practices of one sort or another. Some of them, I mean, the idea of giving something up is so that you build yourself up. It's not just to be mean to yourself. Use those traditions because, you know, that's what they're there for. They sort of make sense now even more.
Eileen, Sheila came in again and was saying that what she calls the loaf idea being good, which is local, organic, and animal friendly, and fair. Fair trade when possible. Is that something that you feel in? I'm thinking about the allotments you've talked of and so on. Is that something that can actually work in a community?
I think the area we work in is very deprived, and there's a lot of addiction problems in that area. And the expense of going and buying organic food or fair trade is an issue. And really, we're trying to overcome that problem by growing. So we are organic in what we do in the allotment, but there's a difficulty in getting people to engage and getting volunteers to come along to it. And that's the challenge we're up against just now. But the thing that we noticed, there's a couple of men that'll come in and they'll water and they'll do things like that, but they haven't got involved in growing anything. And we had some corn, and I'd asked them to plant that. They were over the moon about the fact they had planted the corn. And when you actually get them to engage, you know, they're enjoying what they're doing, but we're limited with the time that we can put in. We need more. I certainly think the community gardens are a way around that in the poor areas, that you can give good quality organic food, and it's substantially different. You know, that we wax lyrical about the cucumbers that we grow ourselves because it's like a different thing that you buy in the shops. It puts you off buying the things from the shops, or courgettes or strawberries or a number of things. So we're still working and getting more community engagement there, you know, to try. And all we're hoping next year will be really the first year where we can be up and running right at the beginning. We were still building beds, we were still filling beds, we were still doing a lot of the kind of high labour work before you could do a lot of the growing. But I think we're ready now really to launch next year, and hopefully we can draw more and more people in. But that's the only way I can see it working in areas where there's, you know, low incomes or, you know, complicated mental health issues through addiction and so on.
How is that funded? When you were saying about the raised beds and the compost and all the rest of it, how do you fund that?
Yeah, through a number of ways. I mean, Mark, the man who runs the local charity, Mark's a dab hand at getting grants. And we have a local wind farm that's generous in giving money. And there's also Enva, which processes, you know, food waste and turns it into compost. And they're prepared to give us that free of charge. I'm not sure that I would prefer us to be doing more we are. I mean, we've got hot bins and everything to compost our own, but we're still getting that really up and running. So the money seems to come. You know, Asda have been generous. There's been various places that have been generous in giving funding. Then part of the local charity is a men's woodwork group, which is really our parishioners again are running that. So they made the raised beds that went in and do a lot of that kind of work that's needed done in the garden. So next year I'll have a better idea really how it's going, because the beds were still being made and filled when we were well into the growing season this year. But next year, you know, we should really be up and running. I mean, we've got a polytunnel, we can use the polytunnel. And we've got raised beds in there, but it's not a huge polytunnel, but it's a polytunnel. And our idea was, you know, if we got veg, what we could do is, you know, do soup, show them how to make soup, because those skills were lost in local communities. And you look at poor areas are full of takeaway shops, betting shops, and not so much pubs now because it's cheaper, you know, to bring your own. But they're full of takeaway shops. And so they're not eating the best of food that might be tasty and everything, and it might be nice for a treat, but they've lost the cooking skills in a lot of cases, and they don't know how much they could do themselves. You know, so we thought it would be possible that we could do a pot soup, have people have some soup, give them a bag of the veg and the cooking instructions away with them, and they could go home and make their own pot soup. And if they found out how tasty that was, then maybe it's something they could continue to do. But we're still, you know, that's a step for next year, really.
Well, it sounds like you're already taking huge steps towards that. So we want to hear from you next year, that's for sure. Mark has got a question that takes us out of our own parishes and so on, and says he's interested in how to tackle the macro issue of the climate crisis being caused by the drive for profit to feed continual growth. Exactly. Where are the Christian economists, he asks, offering the fair and just models? I wonder if that's something that we can have a little word on. Stephen,
I think that's a really important point Mark's made. Our charity chair, Richard Murray, in the chat's put a really important connection there. The Wellbeing Economy Alliance, working for change to our economy so that it works for people and planet across Scotland, are an important part of that. And it is looking at it from economics and fairness angles and tackling those apocalyptic situations we're really going to face in terms of the environment if we don't incorporate that in our way of thinking. I think Matt's made a really good point about the sense of unfairness and simplistic way of looking at the world that doesn't take into account the dramatic changes that we're causing by the way we live and rely on an economic model which causes harm to the planet and to people, particularly those who can afford it the least. So in small ways we can look at that. Rab's mentioned in the chat about the idea of a circular economy where we would try to reduce or not have any waste in terms of the way we live, and you try to regenerate or nurture nature, and that could be about recycling, repairing, but it's particularly about having a thriving economy which is circular, where you've got local communities, charities, social enterprises, where it's really led in your own area. So that, to me, sums up perfectly the principle of subsidiarity from Catholic social teaching, that things at the most local level will have the biggest impact collectively on what happens nationally and around the world, but it's about trusting that local leadership. So for me, it's about community ownership, community control, community decision making. And sometimes that can be in a much larger sense. So it's not the responsibility and the cost and the burden doesn't fall on the community, but there's a trust from a higher national, larger level, if you like, that people in Scotland can do that. And we've got community climate action hubs that are funded through the Scottish Government, roughly speaking, covering each local authority area or a couple of local authority areas, depending on where it makes sense. And each one of those is encouraging some of that practical action, that aspect to taking action in their own lives and their own community, which has to be matched by financial commitment by decision makers in policy and in parliaments as well. And of course, the COP26 conference and every conference of the parties conference since then, we want to see global leadership. We want to see it being raised like this week at the United Nations General Assembly. We want to hear the leaders around the world talking in a way which is capturing the same thoughts on it. So I think my final point would be, I think Pope Leo will be crucial in this. Remember, the first words he spoke about were the changes in work, looking back at Rerum Novarum from his previous predecessor, Pope Leo, and the new things we're dealing with now are around AI and climate change. And how does that relate to the way people work, the dignity of work that we want to get, again, from Catholic social teaching and from our faith, but also that care for creation. I don't think it's impossible, but we do want to hear bold ideas and we want to see innovation. And we'd like to try some of that in Scotland.
Christian economists, David, are there any out there?
Oh, there's quite a lot, but I don't think anybody's been listening to them. The new financial NIFIA, yes, that's, keep forgetting what it stands for. Let's do it again. New International Financial Architect, or something like that. There's been meetings and meetings and meetings. I even ended up at one or two of them a few years ago. That churches, to the extent that they have anything to do with people's decisions on property and investment, of course, has been a big one for climate things as well, do need to put their money where their mouth is, really. People, our friends in Southern Africa, they said, for instance, when it was, there were all these discussions about churches who had investments in oil companies, this is the same as slavery, really, that you're allowing profit to be made to prop up your churches by the misery of others. And we need to be able to put things as clearly as that it's all very well politicians saying, let's get all the oil out of the North Sea, but that is the choice to kill your neighbour, not to love them. Yeah. And the science is there now. The science is fully in place, which says that is not just speculation. That's what will happen. And if you don't like refugees, stop causing people to be displaced from their homelands.
That's what I feel the whole time. I have connections with Zambia. I have friends there who are being put off their small farms because they just can't cope anymore because of the climate. And they're going to have to move. Where do they move to? Somewhere that belongs to somebody else, and on it goes. And then they come here, and we've caused it, and they're the ones that suffer, and then we send them back again. David Ryan has lifted his hand. David, come in, and you must have a question.
Very patient he's been, actually. Yes, thank you, David.
Yes.
Unmute, David.
Okay. Sorry, that was a mistake. I didn't even know it was me. My apologies. No, it wasn't intended. Sorry about that.
Oh, right. We had a bit of excitement there.
Well, you were certainly very patient. So yes.
Oh no, I didn't even know it was. My apologies. No, I was
easy to do. Easy to do.
I was taking a few notes there. Yeah, it's very good.
Not at all. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Eileen, I think the last word should go to you. What have you got for us in the year ahead? You have got some things to look forward to. What should we be doing that makes us look forward to next year and say, we can do this?
I think the coming together in the networking is really, really important when you realise, that you're part of a group, a growing group. And I think there's great encouragement and that certainly in our parish, we've found that really, really, encouraging. We formed really good links with St Ninians in Dundee when we were going for our Eco Congregation Award, and that's remained. And despite the distance, there's a lot of sport between us and sharing things. Recently in Motherwell, the Care of Creation group has started in the diocese, and there's about 16 on that WhatsApp just now, but there's a lot of sharing and encouragement that's taken place there and going forward. But just, I'm going to put a spanner in the works now, but from the conversation that was going on, something has been bothering me over the last wee while. And it's, the situation with fossil fuels, and we've shut down fossil fuels in the North Sea, which I was totally in favour of, in that, coming away from that. But what concerns me is it's not necessarily reducing the use of fossil fuels in the country. And it's been shipped in from elsewhere, and it's been shipped in from countries like Russia, and it's funding the war in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine. So I think it can be very, very complex in getting a correct step here. And, I think it would be wrong to see it too simplistically, that we shut down fossil fuels and the problem's solved. It's not solved if it's been shipped halfway across the world to another country and more fossil fuels being used to do that. I think we have to keep our eyes open all the time, and we have to really search out the truth of things and what's happening in the world. And that's not an answer to the question you answered, but it's just something that's been on my mind. I've been ruminating on it for a wee while and thinking, how do you deal with this?
It's a very important point, David.
Yeah, I mean, that is what the just transition business is all about. That the security that people say they are looking for comes through transitioning away from the dependence on Russia for those sort of things. And so we know, I mean, oil companies in this country are colossally subsidized in a fairly secretive way, but they are. If that were if that funding were moved to helping us move away from burning the stuff, that would be a way to security that would be rather better.
But to do that, see, while there's still an appetite for fossil fuels in the country,
it will take time. It will take time. But what we need not to be put off by is these three words that came in an email from an MSP to me: sensibly, gradually, and eventually.
I'm thinking we should be doing more and talking to people about living simply and reducing.
And and saying that it's a good thing, it's a better way of life rather than just a more impoverished one.
But I think there has to be more of a response from the grassroots to that. I put on a jumper before I put on the heating.
Yep.
I walk to somebody else's house, and when they open the door, it's like a gale of heat that comes out and hits me.
And I've heard politicians say it's scandalous that people should suggest you wear a jumper because you should have a right to overheat your house. The conversations over the garden fence, those are the evangelism, those are it's to give people the courage and the confidence to put a jumper on, even.
That is the best advice we've got tonight. Have courage to put a jumper on. I'm going to hand you back to Rab with great thanks to all three of you.
Yes. Thank you for your patience. Right. Bizarre things can still happen on Zoom meetings, even nowadays, after all the experience we've had in the last couple of years. We're going to conclude with part of the prayer meeting that was held at Faslane on the theme of peace with creation. And it's the prayer that I was sharing there, which is edited together from a few different video sources. But I thought that would be a way of concluding the night. So I'll just share that, and then that should work. Thank you for your patience. just hearing of Bishop Mark's social media experience, it's part of our eco-congregation season of creation stuff to remind people that if they have leaders doing the right thing, to tell them and thank them. Let's pray. Sustaining God as everything with breath sings out in praise. Your indiscriminate love and care for all Earth's web of life overwhelms us. Christ's teaching of the priority of love for enemies disarms us. And the transforming power of the wild wind, the Spirit, fills us with courage to attend to a story so different from those of power and empire, as we long for a security built on trust, on negotiation, not eradication, a story which is built on costly integrity rather than violent hypocrisy driven by fear. So as people of faith, we do not hide, we make it plain that the name of Christ cannot be enlisted to bless or even condone such evils as are guarded behind these barriers. Guarded conscientiously by fellow citizens with lives and loves and families of their own, and indeed with faith. Thus we pray too for them, and with them, with urgent love, with understanding, for change of hearts and minds for all who are caught up in this self-defeating project. We pray that they may set aside the tools of earth's destruction and attend instead to the care of our common home, already groaning and suffering from the damage committed knowingly and unjustly through fossil fuels, through waste, and the dogged refusal to attend to the voice and the rights of the poor, the planet, and all those with whom your rainbow covenant still stands. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thanks to everyone